Ukrainian intelligence revealed barbaric plans of Russians in the east. During the most recent mass attack of Russians last week, they attacked Ukraine with the brand new weapons. According to Mykhailo Podolyak, 77% of the total Wagner forces is now eliminated. And finally, there is another case of Russian sabotage which happened in Belgorod. But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. And before we begin, let me give you this small short story. So I do have a friend from Ukraine who back in 2014 he was living in Dnipro, and as soon as all these events around Crimea started, he immigrated, if you can call it, to Donetsk. But then as Russia invaded Ukraine back in February, he left his country completely. And over the weekend, as a result of this yet another mass attack of Russians, his hometown Dnipro has been severely affected. The entire section of a residential building has completely collapsed, burying its residents under the debris. Some of them survived the initial fall, and then they were left stuck under these extremely heavy concrete plates, waiting to be rescued for several days. And all of them, they were just dressed in their home clothes, waiting outside in the middle of winter to be found by saviors. And even though it might feel like nothing much is happening with this war, and just the general interest to this tragedy decreases, we must not forget that these are just the regular people, just like you and me, who are suffering the consequences of this Russian invasion. These are the people who celebrated New Year just a couple of weeks ago, and among their regular wishes to, for example, lose weight, find a new job, or find a true love, among the most desired wish they had was to have a peaceful sky. And as of today, unfortunately, the New Year wishes of 40 Ukrainians will no longer come true. I wish all the best to the families of those affected, the fastest recovery to those injured, and just in general, just please know that our thoughts and prayers are with you, the people of Ukraine. And I hope that this terror will be over soon, because in the end, good always beats evil. But Dnipro was not the only city or region which has been affected by this mass attack of Russians last week. And right here, for example, we have a picture from Kiev, where its residents are going down the subway during another air raid siren. And reportedly, among the missiles debris which was found in Kiev was the debris of a brand new S-400 Russian missile, with the range of up to 230 kilometers. Which basically means, as you can see from this picture, Russians can now launch them from the territory of Belarus, and such regions as Lutsk, Lviv, Zhytomyr and Rivne can now be targeted. Other regions which have been also affected by this mass attack of Russians last weekend can be seen on this map with these fire symbols. And the places which are marked with the Ukrainian flag is where Ukrainian air defense system was successful. And in addition to completely collapsing the entire section of residential building in Dnipro, Russians were also targeting the energy infrastructure in Kharkov, Lviv and Ivano-Frankivsk regions. And besides that, some activity of Russian military planes has been reported from Belarus. And as you can see right here, here is the recorded schedule of Russian planes arriving to Baranovichy airfield located in Belarus, reportedly for the combined training with the Belarusian forces. Because of this, the Ukrainian authorities expect new attacks and provocations by Russians in the near future, but Ukrainians are no longer tolerating such actions. That is why there will be a response and confrontation. And if you don't want to miss any of these events as soon as they start happening, please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. Thanks so much, and let's continue. Alright, so in fact, we might already potentially have the response of Ukrainians for this mass attack of Russians last weekend. And as you can see right here, for example, some pretty loud noises have been reported in Shebekino, located in Belgorod region. In addition to that, according to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, Russian servicemen detonated a grenade inside the Russian military base, which eliminated 3 Russian soldiers and injured more than a dozen, and it also happened in Belgorod region. With high degree of certainty this has been a sabotage by a Russian soldier, and most likely this was in response in potentially upcoming another wave of a partial mobilization. Next we go to Bryansk region, where according to Russian media sources, a Ukrainian drone dropped 2 grenades against the Russian energy infrastructure. The first one did not detonate, and the second one was covered with the body of a local security guard, which miraculously survived and just sustained several injuries, according to Russian propaganda. And as we go to the capital of Russia, Moscow itself, these last days it has been reported that Russians brought several air defense missile systems. And the majority of them were deployed to the northeast of Moscow around Chkalovsky airfield. Alright, and before I talk about the south, where I have pretty interesting news about the Crimean Bridge, let me give you a very quick brief update about my YouTube problem. As you can see, today I decided to keep all of the footage unblurred, despite the fact of my ongoing demonetization. In only several days I'll be able to know whether blurring footage in the past helped with solving this problem or not, but for now, if you still want to support the channel financially and receive hundreds of uncensored photos and videos every single week, please consider becoming my Patreon. All the useful links can be found down below. Alright, and now as promised, let's briefly talk about the south. And according to the Deputy Prime Minister of Russia, Marat Husnulin, the second section of Crimean Bridge, as you can see right here, is now being installed. And it is estimated that all the 4 destroyed sections will be reinstalled in February, which kinda potentially gives us the idea when the next attack of Ukrainians against this bridge will happen. Next we go to Sevastopol, where one of these past nights the work of Russian air defense system has been activated. And then the very next morning, another Ukrainian drone which was allegedly flying towards Belbek airport has also been intercepted. Moving more to the north, to Zaporozhye, one of these last days Russians attacked another civilian infrastructure of Ukrainians. And speaking about Zaporozhye, according to the representative of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, Evgeny Yerin, Russians are preparing potentially for their next major offensive in this region. According to him, Russians are relocating their forces closer to the front lines, as well as building defense structures and mining these places. And at the same time, according to the Kherson region representative Sergei Khlany, something similar is happening in Kherson region as well, where Russians also started bringing their reinforcements, including Wagner, from the east. And so, it does look like that the next major combat activities will be happening in Zaporozhye-Kherson regions, just like the assumptions that I was making in my previous videos. And while danger in the east still remains, Russians might want to potentially stall their activities on these territories, most likely after this potentially upcoming relative success in Bakhmut and in Solidar. And the reason why would they want to do this is to gain the foothold in already captured territories, reinforce and resupply themselves, and to just basically rest after several months of this offensive in the east, which cost them thousands, tens of thousands of lives. And so right now, let's talk about the east in more details. Where first of all, according to Ukrainian sources, Ukrainians got a little bit closer to Crimea and then repelled some Russian counteroffensive. But as we move to the south, Russians were reportedly successful in capturing a small territory to the east of Klishchinivka. More to the south of it is another city of interest, Kurdyumivka, where Ukrainians reportedly were doing several artillery strikes against Russian positions in this settlement. And as we move even more to the south, Ukrainians reportedly were successful at destroying 5 armored personnel carriers of Russians in Avdiivka area. Even more heavy fighting is happening almost every single day in Marinka, as you can see from this video. And this is basically the image of Russian how liberation should look like. And ultimately, as we move to Donetsk city itself, according to the local Russian quote-unquote authorities, Ukrainians destroyed a lot of civilian infrastructure. Alright, and now let's take a look at this map, which shows us the changes in territorial control. And first of all, as we go to Mariinka, we can see that Russians were relatively successful to the south of this city. As we move back to the north to Opotne, we can see that Russians were also successful to the north of these settlements. But the biggest gains of Russians in the east recently obviously happened around Bakhmut and Solidar area, as you can see right here. According to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, the majority of Russian attacks against Bakhmut came from the north, east, south and southwest, with southwest being one of their most successful directions. And at the same time, some other big battles are happening right now to the west of Belgorod, which is the attempt of Russians to establish the control over this highway, which basically leads to Bakhmut. And even though, as you can see, Bakhmut still stands, according to already some Western media, Ukrainian forces are already started to consider the fact that they might need to retreat from this city in order to avoid being encircled. And now speaking about Solidar, where the situation is most certainly very critical, but it looks like that not every single Ukrainian soldier has left this city and there is still some kind of resistance, at least from the western outskirts from Solidar. Such as, for example, this video from Magyar unit, which shows the drone footage that Ukrainian flag is still stands inside Solidar, in addition to couple other drone footages which show the destruction of a Russian ammunition depot. But pretty much yes, the Russian sources and even the majority of Western sources, including the Institute for the Study of War, they already report that the entire city of Solidar is under full Russian control. And the main concentration of Russian attacks right now is against Krasnohora, Sil Mine and Krasnopolivka. In addition to that, Russians are also attacking Krasnohora from the east and southeast, as it is dangerously close to this major highway. And ultimately, right after capturing Yakovlivka, Russians continue their assault attempts against Vesely and Razdolivka. And even though almost for the very first time in several months it does look like that Russia is getting at least some relative success in the east, the main question is, at what cost? This offensive lasted for several months at a price of tens of thousands of lives, and to be even more precise, according to Mykhailo Podolyak, Wagner itself lost approximately 77% of its forces. The only two accomplishments that Russians were able to do is to kinda, yes, capture Solidar and get a little bit closer to Bakhmut. That's it. But still, why Russians they want Solidar and Bakhmut so much? And well, according to the Ukrainian intelligence, right from this area, the reason why they want to capture Solidar and an area around Andriivka is so that they can encircle Bakhmut instead of going it face forward, which, as you can already see, has failed so far. And after potentially capturing Bakhmut and having the control over this intersection of these major highways, Russians might potentially want to continue their advancement against other major cities in this area, such as Seversk, Kramatorsk and Slavyansk. And ultimately, in the very unlikely case scenario, in case they are successful here as well, this will allow them to expand their invasion to the rest of Donbass region. Unless, of course, like mentioned previously, they would prefer to stall the combat activities in the east in order to resupply and reinforce their forces. We even have this alleged statement by the representative of the Ministry of Defense Intelligence of Ukraine, Andrei Yusov, who said that Putin himself told Valery Gerasimov to capture the entire Donbass by the end of March, which potentially confirms previously made assumption. And then even another statement by the Russian infiltrator in the Zaporozhye region, Vladimir Rogov, who says that Putin has a very serious announcement to make on January 18th. At this very moment we obviously can only guess what Putin is about to say, in case even this speech is set to happen, but once again one of the main assumptions is the announcement of the second wave of the partial mobilization. And this can potentially bring the total number of active Russian soldiers in the Russian army all the way up to 500,000 people. And most likely, their responsibility will be to launch the ultimate counter-offensive with its most likely goal, the full, as Russians call it, liberation of Donbass region. And so, as you can see, we have plenty of signs that there might be another major escalation in the near future. And just once again, if you don't want to miss any of this, just please consider subscribing to my channel. It only takes one click. And if you want to support my work due to still ongoing demonetization, please consider becoming my channel member, use a PayPal link, or become my Patreon, where you receive early access to the additional footage. You can find all the other useful links to the right and down below. Thank you so much for your attention, товарищи, and see you tomorrow.